My grandmother left me everything in her will, so my family tried to have me declared insane. I was 22 when Grandma Rosalie passed away. She'd raised me since I was 8 after my parents died in a car crash. While my aunts and uncles visited maybe twice a year, always asking for money, I was there every Sunday for dinner, every holiday, every doctor's appointment. When the lawyer read her will, the room went dead silent. To my beloved granddaughter, Camilla, I leave my entire estate, the house, all investments, jewelry, and business holdings valued at approximately $4.2 million. My Aunt Patricia's face turned purple. Uncle Wesley started shouting before the lawyer finished reading. "This is ridiculous," Patricia snapped. Mother was clearly suffering from dementia. Camilla manipulated her. She was sharp as a tack until the end, I said quietly. Sharp? Uncle Wesley laughed bitterly. She thought her dead husband was still alive. She talked to her cats like they were people. She was lonely, not crazy. The lawyer cleared his throat. Mrs. Holbrook was mentally evaluated just 6 months ago for insurance purposes. She was declared completely competent. That's when things got ugly. Within a week, my family hired their own lawyer. They filed a petition claiming Grandma had been suffering from severe mental decline and that I'd coerced her into changing her will. They demanded the estate be divided equally among all her children. Then came the phone calls. "You know this isn't right," my cousin Derek called to say. "You were just a kid when she took you in. We're her actual children. I was her granddaughter. I took care of her. You isolated her from us," Aunt Patricia accused during another call. "Poisoned her against her own family." The accusations escalated quickly. They claimed I'd hidden her medications, that I'd prevented them from visiting, that I'd stolen from her while she was vulnerable. None of it was true, but they had money for expensive lawyers. 3 weeks later, I received papers. They were having me committed for a psychological evaluation. Due to concerning behavior and possible mental instability following the death of Rosalie Holbrook, Camilla Reynolds must undergo a 72-hour psychiatric hold for evaluation. My stomach dropped. If they could prove I was mentally unfit, they could contest the will and claim I'd been too unstable to properly care for Grandma or receive her inheritance. The commitment hearing was scheduled for the following Monday. That's when I found Grandma's secret room. I was cleaning out her bedroom when I noticed something odd about the walk-in closet. The space seemed smaller than it should be. Running my hands along the back wall, I felt a hidden latch. Behind the false wall was a small room filled with filing cabinets, a desk, and boxes of documents. On the desk was a letter with my name on it. "My dearest Camilla," it began. "If you're reading this, then my children are probably trying to steal what's rightfully yours. I've been preparing for this day. What I found in those files changed everything. Bank statements showing my aunts and uncles had stolen over $200,000 from Grandma's accounts over the past 5 years. Recorded phone conversations of them discussing how to get their hands on her money. Medical records proving she'd been completely mentally competent. And most shocking of all, evidence of a plan they'd discussed to have her declared incompetent so they could control her finances. But the final box contained something that made my blood run cold. Inside were detailed psychiatric evaluations. Not of Grandma, but of me. Reports dating back 3 years, filled with observations about my concerning attachment to my grandmother and my potential for manipulation. They'd been building a case against me long before she died. The reports were signed by Dr. Marcus Brennan, a psychiatrist I'd never met. I kept reading through the night. The more I discovered, the more horrified I became. My family hadn't just planned to steal from Grandma, they'd planned to destroy me in the process. There were emails between Patricia and Wesley discussing how to neutralize my influence over their mother. Text messages about finding ways to prove I was mentally unstable so they could have me removed from Grandma's life entirely. But what I found next made me understand just how deep this conspiracy went. Hidden in a folder marked insurance claims were medical records that had been falsified. Someone had been doctoring Grandma's health reports, making her appear more confused and vulnerable than she actually was. The signatures belonged to Dr. Helena Voss, Grandma's primary care physician for over a decade. Dr. Voss had been in on it. I found email chains between her and Patricia dating back 2 years. They'd been slowly building a medical case for Grandma's incompetence, with Dr. Voss adding notes about increasing confusion and memory lapses that Grandma had never exhibited. "Patient continues to show signs of moderate dementia," one report read, recommending family intervention to manage finances. Except Grandma had been managing her own finances perfectly until the day she died. I'd seen her balance her checkbook every month, sharp as ever. The cruelest part was a recorded conversation from last Christmas, just months before Grandma's death. "She's completely dependent on the old woman," Patricia's voice crackled through the ancient recording device. "It's unhealthy. Camilla's 22 and has no life of her own." "Perfect," Wesley replied. "Makes her look unstable. No normal young woman would isolate herself like that. Dr. Brennan says we have enough evidence to suggest she's been psychologically manipulating Mother. Claims of elder abuse might stick too." My hands shook as I listened to them plot my destruction. They'd turned my love for Grandma into evidence of mental illness. But Grandma had been recording everything. As I dug deeper into her files, I realized the scope of her surveillance was staggering. She'd hidden cameras throughout the house, recording devices in her purse, and even a microphone in her car. Every conversation, every visit, every theft had been documented. She'd known what they were planning long before I did. In another folder, I found a timeline she'd created, mapping out each instance of theft, each lie, each step in their plan to have her declared incompetent. The woman they claimed was losing her mind had been conducting a 3-year investigation into their criminal activity. There were photographs of Patricia going through her jewelry box, Wesley taking cash from her purse, and their lawyer meeting with Dr. Brennan at a restaurant. Grandma had hired a private investigator without anyone knowing. The investigator's report was damning. My family had been planning this since before my parents died, when I'd first come to live with Grandma as a child. They'd seen how close we were becoming and decided I was a threat to their inheritance. Subject Patricia Weber expressed frustration that her mother had become too attached to the deceased daughter's child, the report noted. Plans discussed to remove the girl from the equation when the time comes. They'd been plotting against me for 14 years. I found recordings of conversations I'd never heard before. Patricia calling Grandma crazy for taking me in after my parents' deaths. Wesley suggesting they contest guardianship and put me in foster care. Other relatives speculating about how much money I was costing the family. But the most devastating discovery was a folder labeled contingency plans. Inside were detailed strategies for what to do if their original plan failed. If they couldn't have Grandma declared incompetent, they'd wait until she died and then have me committed. If that didn't work, they'd claim I'd forged the will. If that failed, they'd manufacture evidence of me abusing Grandma. They'd covered every possible scenario except one: Grandma fighting back from beyond the grave. The commitment hearing was in 3 days. I spent every waking hour going through her files, building my defense. She documented every visit, every conversation, every dollar that went missing from her accounts. The most damning evidence was a video recording from her bedroom, hidden camera capturing a conversation between Patricia and Wesley from 6 months ago. If we can't get her declared incompetent ourselves, we'll have Camilla committed, Patricia said, rifling through Grandma's jewelry box. Dr. Brennan owes me a favor. He'll say whatever we need him to say. And if Camilla's institutionalized, we can claim she coerced Mother while she was mentally unfit, Wesley added, pocketing a gold watch. Exactly. Then the will becomes invalid, and we split everything properly. I watched my grandmother's face in the background of the video. She was pretending to sleep, but her eyes were open, watching them steal from her and plot against me. But there was another video that made my blood boil even more. This one showed Dr. Voss visiting Grandma just a month before her death. On camera, Grandma was alert, coherent, and completely aware of what was happening. Rosalie, we need to discuss your living situation, Dr. Voss said. Your family is concerned about your ability to manage independently. My family is concerned about my bank account, Grandma replied sharply. And you're helping them steal from me. Dr. Voss shifted uncomfortably. That's not true. We just want what's best for you. What's best for me is keeping Patricia and Wesley's greedy hands off my money, Grandma said. And I know exactly what you're all planning. The doctor looked shocked. Rosalie, that kind of paranoid thinking is exactly what worries us. Paranoid? Grandma pulled out a folder from her nightstand. I have photographs of my son stealing my jewelry. I have recordings of my daughter planning to have my granddaughter committed. I have bank records showing unauthorized withdrawals. Which part of that is paranoid? Dr. Voss went pale. I think we should discuss adjusting your medications. My medications are fine. Your conscience is what needs adjusting. The video ended with Dr. Voss leaving quickly, but not before Grandma called after her. Tell Patricia and Wesley that I'm not as stupid as they think, and neither is Camilla. That night, I called Grandma's lawyer, Mr. Hartwell, but I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about all the times my family had visited and how wrong everything had felt, how they'd speak about Grandma like she wasn't in the room, how they'd count her possessions with their eyes while pretending to care about her health. I need to see you immediately, I told Mr. Hartwell the next morning. I have evidence that changes everything. When I arrived at his office, I brought 6 boxes of documentation. Mr. Hartwell, a distinguished man in his 70s who'd known our family for decades, listened in growing shock as I explained what I'd found. He paused, reviewing the psychiatric reports. This is criminal. They've been planning this for years. Can they really have me committed based on fake evidence? Not if we present this first. He held up the recordings. Camilla, your grandmother was brilliant. She's handed us everything we need to destroy their case. But as we reviewed the evidence, I realized there was even more I hadn't discovered yet. Mr. Hartwell made some phone calls and learned that Dr. Brennan had been flagged by the state medical board before for questionable practices. Dr. Voss was under investigation for insurance fraud in unrelated cases. My family had chosen corrupt doctors because they were the only ones willing to fabricate evidence. There's something else, Mr. Hartwell said. Your grandmother came to see me 6 months before she died. She suspected what was happening and wanted to protect you legally. He pulled out another file I'd never seen. She created a trust that becomes active if anyone contests her will or attempts to have you declared incompetent. If that happens, the entire estate goes to charity, and whoever initiated the challenge gets nothing. My grandmother had been playing chess while my family was playing checkers. She also filed police reports about the thefts, but asked them not to investigate until after her death. She wanted to give her children a chance to confess and return what they'd stolen. They never did. We spent the next 2 days preparing. Mr. Hartwell brought in a colleague who specialized in psychiatric law, and together we built an ironclad defense. Meanwhile, my family continued their assault. They called my college friends, claiming I'd had a psychotic break after Grandma's death. They contacted my employer, suggesting I wasn't fit to work. Patricia even called my landlord, hinting that I might be dangerous. But their harassment backfired when one of my college friends, Jenna, called me. Camilla, your aunt called me asking weird questions about your mental health, she said. She wanted to know if you'd ever talked about hurting yourself or others. It was creepy. I asked Jenna to document the conversation, and she agreed to testify if needed. When I reached out to other friends, I discovered Patricia and Wesley had called all of them with similar questions, trying to build evidence of my supposed instability. They'd also contacted my professors, my boss, even my dentist. Anyone who might have insight into my mental state was being pressured to say something negative about me. But their plan backfired spectacularly. Everyone they contacted was confused and concerned about why family members would be spreading rumors about my mental health. Several people called me directly to warn me about the strange conversations. My boss, Mrs. Chen, was particularly upset. Your uncle suggested you might become violent at work, she told me. I've never seen you raise your voice, let alone act aggressively. Something isn't right about this. I realized they were creating a paper trail that could actually help me. Every person they contacted could testify that my family was deliberately spreading false information about my mental state. The morning of the hearing, I arrived at the courthouse with Mr. Hartwell and our boxes of evidence. My family sat on the opposite side with their expensive legal team and Dr. Brennan, the psychiatrist who'd never met me but was prepared to declare me insane. But I noticed something else. There were reporters in the courtroom. Somehow, word had gotten out about the case, and local media was covering the story of the family trying to have their relative committed to steal her inheritance. The judge, an elderly woman named Honorable Judge Catherine Mills, called the proceedings to order. We're here to determine whether Ms. Camilla Reynolds requires involuntary psychiatric evaluation, she began. I'll hear from the petitioners first. Patricia's lawyer stood up, a slick man in an expensive suit who immediately began painting me as a manipulative predator who'd taken advantage of a vulnerable elderly woman. Your Honor, the evidence clearly shows that Ms. Reynolds isolated Mrs. Holbrook from her family, controlled her finances, and coerced her into changing her will. We have expert testimony that suggests Ms. Reynolds suffers from severe attachment disorders and possible sociopathic tendencies. As he spoke, I watched my family's faces. Patricia looked confident, almost smug. Wesley kept checking his phone. Their other siblings, my Aunt Nancy and Uncle Robert, looked uncomfortable, like they weren't entirely sure this was the right thing to do. The lawyer presented their evidence. Testimonials from family members claiming I'd prevented them from visiting Grandma, financial records showing large expenditures during my time caring for her, and character witnesses who would testify to my concerning behavior. Dr. Brennan took the stand, confidently describing my concerning patterns of behavior and manipulative relationship with my grandmother. He'd never spoken to me, but he painted a detailed picture of my supposed mental illness. The subject displays classic signs of dependent personality disorder with sociopathic tendencies, he testified. Her isolation tactics, financial manipulation, and aggressive responses to family intervention all point to severe psychological dysfunction. In my professional opinion, Dr. Brennan concluded, Ms. Reynolds requires immediate psychiatric intervention. Her current mental state makes her a danger to herself and others. I watched the judge's face as Dr. Brennan spoke. She looked skeptical, occasionally raising an eyebrow at his more dramatic claims. When it was our turn, Mr. Hartwell stood up slowly. Your Honor, I'd like to present evidence that will completely discredit these proceedings. He began with the bank records showing how Patricia and Wesley had systematically stolen from Grandma over 5 years. The amounts were staggering. Forged checks, unauthorized withdrawals, credit card charges for personal expenses, all charged to Grandma's accounts. The petitioners claim Ms. Reynolds manipulated her grandmother financially, Mr. Hartwell said, but the evidence shows that it was the petitioners themselves who were stealing from Mrs. Holbrook. Then came the recorded conversations, played over the courtroom speakers for everyone to hear. The sound of my family plotting to have me committed filled the room. Patricia's face went white as her own voice described bribing Dr. Brennan. Wesley actually tried to leave, but the bailiff blocked the exit. Wait, there's more, Mr. Hartwell said. He played the recording of Dr. Voss and Grandma, where the doctor suggested adjusting Grandma's medications to make her more compliant. The courtroom gasped when they heard Grandma's sharp responses, clearly demonstrating her mental competence. But the most powerful evidence was the bedroom video. As the recording played, showing Patricia and Wesley stealing jewelry while discussing how to have me institutionalized, Judge Mills leaned forward in her chair. Stop the recording, she said sharply. The courtroom fell silent. Dr. Brennan, the judge said, her voice cold as ice. Did you just hear yourself being described as someone who would falsify a psychiatric evaluation in exchange for a favor? Dr. Brennan's confident demeanor crumbled. Your Honor, I can explain. I don't think you can. Judge Mills turned to the court reporter. Please note that I'm referring Dr. Brennan to the State Medical Board for immediate investigation. Bailiff, please ensure he doesn't leave until I've spoken with the prosecutor's office. But we weren't done. Mr. Hartwell presented the falsified medical records, showing how Dr. Voss had been documenting symptoms of dementia that Grandma never exhibited. He played recordings of my college friends describing the harassment from my family. He showed photographs of the thefts that had been occurring for years. Your Honor, Mr. Hartwell said, this isn't a case of a young woman needing psychiatric help. This is a criminal conspiracy to steal from an elderly woman and destroy her granddaughter's life in the process. The judge then did something unexpected. She asked to speak with me directly. Ms. Reynolds, she said, I'd like you to tell me about your relationship with your grandmother. I stood up, my hands shaking. Your Honor, my grandmother was the smartest, kindest person I've ever known. She taught me how to balance a checkbook, how to stand up for myself, and how to see through people who pretend to care about you, but really just want something from you. I looked directly at Patricia and Wesley. She also taught me that family isn't just about blood. It's about who shows up when you need them. And my aunts and uncles never showed up for her, except when they needed money. The judge nodded. And how would you describe your mental state currently? I'm angry, I said honestly. I'm angry that they're trying to steal from the woman who raised me. I'm angry that they're calling me crazy for loving her. And I'm angry that they think they can lie to a judge and get away with it. Judge Mills almost smiled. That sounds like a perfectly rational response to me. She then addressed Patricia and Wesley directly. In 40 years on this bench, I've rarely seen such a calculated attempt to abuse our legal system. You've committed theft, conspiracy, and attempted fraud. You've wasted this court's time with fabricated evidence and false testimony. Patricia tried to interrupt. Your Honor, you were just trying to steal from your own mother and destroy an innocent young woman's life in the process. Judge Mills cut her off. I'm dismissing these proceedings immediately. Ms. Reynolds, you're free to go. She wasn't finished. Furthermore, I'm ordering an immediate criminal investigation into theft charges against Patricia Weber and Wesley Holbrook. The evidence suggests they've stolen substantial amounts from their deceased mother's estate. As the gavel came down, my family's legal team scrambled to leave, but the damage was done. Within hours, local news picked up the story of the family who tried to have their own relative committed to steal her inheritance. The story went viral. Videos of the court proceedings spread across social media, with people expressing outrage at my family's behavior. Someone set up a GoFundMe to help with my legal expenses, even though I didn't need it. Lawyers from across the country reached out offering to help with other cases involving elder abuse, but the real impact was on my family's reputations. Patricia worked as a real estate agent in our small town. Within days, her agency fired her, citing the negative publicity. Wesley's construction business lost several major contracts when the recordings of him planning to steal from his own mother became public. Their other siblings quickly distanced themselves from the scandal. My Aunt Nancy and Uncle Robert released statements claiming they had no knowledge of the theft or the conspiracy, throwing Patricia and Wesley under the bus to save their own reputations. The criminal investigation moved quickly. With Grandma's meticulous documentation, prosecutors had everything they needed. Patricia and Wesley were arrested 3 days later. During the search of their homes, police found more of Grandma's jewelry and discovered additional evidence of financial abuse going back even further than we'd known. In Patricia's home office, they found a safe containing over $50,000 in cash that they couldn't account for, along with several pieces of expensive jewelry that matched items reported missing from Grandma's collection. Wesley's garage contained furniture and artwork that had been removed from Grandma's house over the years. When confronted, he claimed Grandma had given him permission to take them, but there was no documentation supporting his claim. The investigation expanded when police discovered that Dr. Voss had been involved in similar schemes with other elderly patients. She'd been systematically diagnosing competent seniors with dementia to help their relatives gain control of their finances. The FBI got involved when they discovered the scheme had crossed state lines, involving multiple doctors and several elderly victims in different cities. Dr. Brennan lost his medical license and was charged with conspiracy to commit fraud. It turned out this wasn't his first time fabricating psychiatric evaluations for money. He'd been doing it for years, helping wealthy families have their relatives committed to gain access to their money. The trial 6 months later was a media sensation. Patricia and Wesley each received 2 years in prison for elder abuse and theft. Their lawyer was sanctioned by the state bar. Dr. Voss got 5 years and lost her medical license permanently. But the most satisfying moment came when the judge ordered them to pay full restitution, not just for what they'd stolen, but for the emotional damage they'd caused and the legal expenses they'd forced me to incur. Mrs. Weber and Mr. Holbrook, the judge said during sentencing, you betrayed the trust of a woman who loved you, and you attempted to destroy the life of a young woman whose only crime was caring for her grandmother. Your actions represent the worst of human nature. Patricia broke down crying, finally realizing the magnitude of what she'd lost. Not just the money, but her relationship with her remaining family, her career, and her reputation in the community. Wesley remained defiant to the end, claiming he'd been protecting the family's interests, and that I had somehow manipulated everyone, including the judge. But the real victory came when I was finally able to properly honor Grandma's memory. With the inheritance secure, I used part of it to establish the Rosalie Holbrook Foundation for Elder Protection, helping other families facing financial abuse from their own relatives. I kept Grandma's house, converting the secret room into an office where I work on cases for elderly clients who've been abandoned or exploited by their families. The foundation started small, but word spread quickly about what we were doing. Within the first year, we'd helped over 50 families dealing with similar situations. Each case was different, but the pattern was usually the same: adult children who saw their aging parents as ATMs rather than human beings. One of our first cases involved an 82-year-old woman whose son had forged her signature on documents transferring her house to his name. Using the techniques Grandma had taught me about documenting everything, we helped her gather evidence and get her home back. Another case involved a widower whose daughter-in-law was slowly poisoning him with excessive medications to make him appear incompetent so she could control his finances. We worked with Adult Protective Services to get him the medical care he needed and expose the abuse. The most rewarding cases were the ones where we could prevent the abuse before it went too far. We developed educational programs to help seniors recognize the warning signs of financial exploitation and legal workshops to help them protect themselves. But the foundation also served another purpose. It gave me a way to process my own anger and grief about what had happened. Working with other victims helped me understand that what my family had done wasn't just about money, it was about power and control. They couldn't stand that Grandma had chosen me over them, and they were willing to destroy both of us to get what they thought they deserved. The rest of my family never spoke to me again after the trial. Patricia's daughter, my cousin Derek, tried to reach out once, claiming he'd known nothing about the scheme. I had Grandma's recordings of him discussing it in detail. I know you were there when your mother planned to have me committed, I told him during our only conversation. I have it on tape. Don't contact me again. Derek tried to argue that he'd been pressured by his mother, that he'd never wanted to hurt me. But I'd learned from Grandma not to trust pretty words when someone's actions told a different story. 3 years later, I'm still living in Grandma's house. I kept her cats, Mr. Whiskers and Lady Penelope, and I talked to them just like she did. Because sometimes, when you've been betrayed by everyone else, your pets are the only family you can trust. The house feels different now, though. It's not just a place where I'm hiding from the world, it's a headquarters for fighting back against people who prey on the vulnerable. I've added security cameras throughout the property, partly because of ongoing threats from my family's supporters, but mostly because I've learned the value of documenting everything. The secret room has been expanded into a full investigation center, with computer equipment, filing systems, and a direct line to law enforcement. Last month, I received a letter from Patricia in prison. She claimed she was sorry, that she'd just been desperate for money, that family should forgive family. I threw it away without reading past the first paragraph. Because Grandma taught me something important in those files. Some people will destroy you if you let them, even if they share your blood. The family that matters isn't the one you're born into. It's the one that shows up for you when it counts. And Grandma showed up for me even after she was gone. But the letter made me realize something else. Patricia still didn't understand what she'd done wrong. In her mind, she was the victim, wrongfully imprisoned for trying to protect the family's money from an outsider. She couldn't comprehend that I wasn't an outsider. I was the daughter Grandma never had, the one who sat through doctor's appointments and held her hand during chemo treatments and listened to her stories about the old days. Wesley never wrote to me, but I heard through mutual acquaintances that he'd been telling other inmates that his crazy niece had framed him for crimes he didn't commit. Even in prison, he was maintaining his innocence. The lack of remorse from either of them validated my decision to cut contact permanently. If they couldn't acknowledge what they'd done, they certainly couldn't be trusted not to do it again. My Aunt Nancy and Uncle Robert did eventually reach out, claiming they wanted to heal the family, but their idea of healing involved me dropping all charges and moving past what had happened. "It's been 3 years, Nancy said during an awkward phone call. "Don't you think it's time to forgive and forget?" "I've forgiven," I told her, "but I haven't forgotten, and I never will." The foundation has helped over 200 families so far. Each case reminds me why Grandma left me everything. Not because I was perfect, but because I was there when she needed me. We've expanded beyond individual cases to work on policy reform. The foundation lobbied for stronger laws protecting elderly people from financial abuse, and we've helped train bank employees to recognize signs of exploitation. One of our biggest victories was getting legislation passed requiring doctors to report suspected elder abuse, similar to laws protecting children. Dr. Voss's case had highlighted how medical professionals could enable abuse by fabricating diagnoses, and we wanted to make sure other doctors couldn't use their authority to help families steal from elderly patients. The foundation also created a scholarship program for young people who've been caregivers for elderly relatives. Too many kids sacrifice their own futures to care for grandparents or other family members, only to be cut out of wills or punished for their dedication. I think about those young caregivers often, especially when I'm working late in the secret room, surrounded by case files and evidence of human greed. They remind me that not every family is like mine, that there are still people who understand what loyalty and love actually mean. That's what family really means, and that's worth more than any inheritance money could buy. Though I have to admit, having both the money and the moral victory feels pretty good too, especially when Patricia's parole gets denied every year. Her lawyer keeps filing appeals, claiming she's been rehabilitated and deserves early release. But the parole board reviews her case file, including the recordings of her planning to have me committed and the evidence of years of systematic theft, and decides she needs to serve her full sentence. Some might call that petty. I call it justice. After all, Grandma taught me well, and the best revenge is living well with the family fortune your relatives tried to steal. Mr. Whiskers agrees. He told me so this morning. Actually, both cats have become somewhat famous in their own right. Local media occasionally does follow-up stories about the foundation, and they always mention Grandma's cats and how she used to talk to them like people. Maybe she wasn't as crazy as her family claimed, one reporter noted. Maybe she was just lonely and found comfort in her pets. What they don't know is that I've continued Grandma's habit of talking to the cats, and they're excellent listeners. When I'm struggling with a difficult case or feeling overwhelmed by the foundation's growth, I'll sit in Grandma's old chair and explain the situation to Mr. Whiskers and Lady Penelope. They always seem to understand. Sometimes I wonder if Grandma's spirit is somehow speaking through them, offering guidance from beyond the grave. It sounds crazy, but no crazier than a family trying to have their own relative committed to steal her inheritance. And in a world where people can be so cruel to those they're supposed to love, a little bit of magic doesn't seem too much to ask for. The foundation continues to grow, now operating in 6 states with plans to expand nationally. We've helped over 400 families and trained thousands of professionals to recognize elder abuse, but the work is never finished. Every week brings new cases of children stealing from parents, spouses exploiting their partners, and professionals taking advantage of vulnerable seniors. It's depressing work sometimes, but it's also deeply meaningful. Every family we help, every abuser we stop, every elderly person we protect, it's all a testament to Grandma's wisdom and love. She knew that the best way to honor her memory wasn't through grief or revenge, but through action. By using her gift to protect others facing the same cruelties we'd experienced, I keep her photo on the desk in the secret room, right next to the recording equipment she used to protect me. Sometimes I tell her about the people we've helped, about the families we've saved from predators disguising themselves as relatives, sharp as a tack until the end. I whisper to her picture, and in the afternoon light streaming through the window, I swear she winks back. 5 years after Grandma's death, the foundation received an unexpected donation from an anonymous benefactor, $500,000 with a note saying simply, "For Rosalie's granddaughter who never gave up." I suspected it might be from one of the families we'd helped, someone whose life had been transformed by our intervention. But I never found out for certain, and perhaps that's as it should be. Grandma always said that the best good deeds are done in secret, without expectation of recognition or reward. The mystery donation felt like her way of reminding me that there are still good people in the world, even when it sometimes feels like greed and selfishness are winning. The money allowed us to expand our legal advocacy program, providing free attorneys for elderly victims who couldn't afford to fight back against their exploitative family. It's one of our most successful initiatives, with a 94% success rate in recovering stolen assets and stopping ongoing abuse. We also use part of the donation to create a safe house network for elderly people who need to escape dangerous family situations. It's heartbreaking how many seniors are trapped with abusive relatives because they have nowhere else to go. The safe houses provide temporary shelter while we work to find permanent solutions, whether that's reconnecting them with trustworthy family members, helping them find appropriate care facilities, or simply giving them time to make their own decisions without pressure or threats. Patricia was released from prison last year after serving her full sentence. She immediately tried to contact me through mutual acquaintances, claiming she wanted to make amends and rebuild our relationship. I declined. Making amends would require acknowledging what she'd done and why it was wrong. Based on her letters from prison and reports from people who'd spoken with her, she still believed she'd been unfairly persecuted for trying to protect the family's interests. She'd learned nothing from her time in prison except how to be more careful about getting caught. Wesley was released 6 months later and immediately violated his parole by attempting to contact me directly. He showed up at the foundation's office, demanding to speak with me about setting the record straight. Security escorted him off the property, and his parole officer sent him back to prison for 3 months. When he was released again, he'd apparently learned to stay away, though I occasionally hear reports of him bad-mouthing me and the foundation to anyone who will listen. Their lack of genuine remorse confirmed that I'd made the right decision in cutting contact. Some people are incapable of change, especially when it comes to admitting they've been wrong. But their continued bitterness also highlighted something important. The work we're doing at the foundation is necessary precisely because people like Patricia and Wesley exist in every community, preying on elderly relatives who trust them. The foundation's success has attracted attention from researchers studying elder abuse, and we've become a case study in how families can fight back against financial exploitation. Universities have reached out asking to interview me about the techniques Grandma used to document the abuse and build a case against her children. I've spoken at conferences across the country, sharing Grandma's story and the lessons we learned about protecting vulnerable adults. The response is always the same: shock at the cruelty of family members and admiration for Grandma's strategic thinking. "Your grandmother was remarkable," one conference attendee told me. "She turned the tables on her abusers and protected you even after her death. That takes incredible courage and intelligence." I always agree, but I also point out that Grandma shouldn't have had to be remarkable. She should have been able to trust her own children not to steal from her and plot against her granddaughter. The fact that she had to become a detective in her own home, documenting crimes committed by her own family, is a tragedy, even if it ultimately led to justice. That's the message I try to convey at these conferences. Elder abuse is not just a crime, it's a betrayal of the most fundamental human bond. When families turn predatory, they destroy not just financial security, but trust, love, and dignity. The foundation continues to evolve and grow. We've launched educational programs for schools, teaching young people about elder abuse and their role in preventing it. We've developed apps that allow elderly people to quickly document suspicious behavior and report concerns to trusted contacts. We've also created support groups for young adults who've been caregivers for elderly relatives, providing a space where they can share experiences and learn from each other without judgment. Many of these young caregivers have faced similar accusations from family members, claims that they're manipulating or exploiting the elderly person they're caring for. It's a common tactic used by relatives who want to justify their own theft or neglect. The support groups help these caregivers understand that they're not alone, and that taking care of a loved one is not a mental illness or character flaw. It's an act of love that should be honored, not punished. Looking back on everything that's happened, I realized that Grandma's greatest gift wasn't the inheritance or even the evidence she gathered against my family. It was the example she set of how to fight back against injustice with intelligence, preparation, and unwavering determination. She could have given up when she realized what her children were planning. She could have confronted them directly or simply changed her will to leave everything to charity out of spite. Instead, she chose a different path. She gathered evidence, built a case, and created a plan that would not only protect me, but also ensure that her children faced consequences for their actions. She turned her final years into a masterclass in strategic thinking and moral courage. That's the legacy I'm trying to continue through the Foundation's work. We don't just help people recover stolen money or escape abusive situations. We empower them to fight back with the same intelligence and determination that Grandma showed. Every case we take on is a chance to honor her memory and prove that predators don't always win, that justice is possible even when the system seems stacked against the vulnerable. Mr. Whiskers and Lady Penelope are getting older now, but they're still excellent listeners and occasional advisors on difficult cases. Sometimes I think they understand the Foundation's mission better than most humans do. They've seen the worst of human nature through the stories I tell them, but they've also witnessed the power of love, loyalty, and strategic thinking to overcome evil. In their own small way, they're part of Grandma's continuing fight for justice. And on quiet Sunday afternoons, when I'm sitting in Grandma's chair with both cats purring beside me, I can almost hear her voice whispering approval for the work we're doing. Sharp as a tack until the end, I tell her picture. And in the golden light of another peaceful day in the house she left me, I know she's still watching over us all. The Foundation has become her immortality, not through monuments or memorials, but through the lives we save and the families we protect from predators who share their blood but not their values. That's worth more than any inheritance. That's worth everything.